I'm here with Mark Schubin, technology consultant with SchubinCafe.com. You were on the panel talking about all the other things revolved around 4K other than pixels, which we all know about, but the other elements are not quite as well defined. What do you think is the most important thing after pixels, which we already know, that needs to be settled upon and worked on in order to make the UHD experience as good as it can be?
I think it's actually frame rate, and I wouldn't say it's after pixels. I'd say it has to be before pixels. And one of the reasons for that is the higher the number of pixels you have in the static picture, the greater the frame rate you need for moving images. The reason for that is consider a moving image as moving a certain number of pixels per second based on the frame rate. Well, the more pixels you have across, the longer it takes something to cross the screen and be in a particular pixel or column of pixels as it's moving. And so 4K should actually require twice the frame rate of HD.
I've heard it said that one of the aspects of 4K is sitting closer to the screen, right? A 1.5 screen heights instead of 3 for HD. And that when you do that, you have more of the screen in your field of view and more of your peripheral vision is engaged. And that might be another reason for high frame rate.
Yeah, and that's certainly the case if people are going to sit closer to their TVs. The experience seems to be that people don't sit closer to their TVs. You could have a larger TV, you could get a TV the size of the entire wall, and that would be the equivalent of sitting closer to the TV. But you're absolutely right that peripheral vision does require a higher frame rate.
But are people going to shoot well, we do see 720p at 60 frames per second now. We don't see 1080p at 60 frames broadcast anyway. We do see it coming online. And that's probably where we're going to first see UHD or 4K content. We already do see it online, and that's going to be the first method of delivery. So will we be able to see 4K at 60p at 120 frames per second even, given the bandwidth limitations?
It's a big problem, and that's one of the things that I mentioned on the panel, that 4K relative to either 720p or 1080i requires 8 times the number of bits per second before compression or after compression. So the connection between the set-top box and the TV, or at the production area before it gets into transmission. And we can do that. We've shown that we can produce 4K today. We can see 4K today, but it kind of precludes everything else. You can't go to a higher dynamic range if that requires between 20 and 50% more pixels because you're already 800%. You can't go to higher frame rate if that requires 100% more because you're already at 800%. So 1,600% and 2,400%, those are beyond what we can deal with today.
Do you see the internet infrastructure improving anytime soon to allow that much extra data to come down? Or is it going to require greater and greater compression efficiency in order to squeeze that much more data down existing pipes?
Well, I think we will have greater compression efficiency, and both higher spatial resolution and higher temporal resolution increase compression efficiency because they make sharper pictures, so it's easier to estimate motion, and there's less difference between frames and less difference between pixels, so there's less difference information that needs to be transmitted. So that part's okay. It's on either side of the compression that I'm concerned. What do you do before the compression, and what do you do after the compression? We're already straining the connection between the set-top box and the TV. We're already straining the production equipment. And for what? We're not getting much bang for the buck. As the viewer tests that I showed indicate, you do get an improvement from 4K, no question about that, but it's a very small improvement. You get a much larger improvement from higher frame rate and from higher dynamic range.
And you're talking about viewer preference studies.
Yeah, it's not viewer. Well, yeah, I guess you could call it viewer preference. It's viewer studies where viewers watch things and then rate what they think of them, and it's normalized onto the usual grading scale, the 5-grade EBU scale. and you find about a half a grade of improvement under ideal circumstances for a 56-inch screen for 4K, and you find a full grade of improvement for every doubling of frame rate, and you find a similar full grade of improvement for going to a greater contrast ratio, like going from 400 nits to 1,000 nits.
You mentioned the transport of the information before and after compression. I'm more concerned, the studios have to deal with before compression. Consumers have to deal with after compression. And at the moment, what we have is HDMI 2.0. And as I was talking about with Joe Kane, that's already getting close to maxed out and not even coming close to that 800%. Needing that much more data transport. He suggested that DisplayPort is the answer. And I said, well, yeah, but HDMI is so entrenched in the consumer industry. Are we going to be able to see DisplayPort supplant it with its increased bandwidth and ability to carry that much more data?
Well, before there was HDMI, there were RCA connectors. And so we've made a move. We can make another move, whether it's to DisplayPort, whether it's to multiple HDMIs. Those are things that people are going to have to come up with. I'm not particularly concerned. I'm just concerned with the amount of data. And whatever it's carried on, there's also the processing in the set. It's going to have to deal with extremely high data rates.
I'm not sure how easily people are going to deal with multiple HDMI cables running from one device to another.
Yeah, but it's happened before, and in the RCA era, people were using 3 RCA connections. So
yeah, but it feels like a step back, going from 3 RCA or 5, for component plus stereo audio to 1 HDMI cable. Oh, isn't that so great? Only 1 cable. Oh, now we have to go back to multiple cables? I don't think so.
Well, get 1 cable that's got a really fat connector.
Okay, well, hey, thanks so much for talking with us.
You're welcome.